I was falsely accused of cheating by my wife, lost my kids, and spent years rebuilding my life. When she found out I won the lottery, she tried to sue me for alimony. I turned the tables in the most unexpected way. I'm a 34-year-old guy, and my life was pretty much perfect until 3 years ago. I had a beautiful wife, Sarah, 2 amazing kids, Emily, 8, and Jake, 5, and a steady job as a project manager at a construction firm. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. Life was good, or so I thought. It all started when Sarah began acting off. She'd come home late from work, her phone always face down, and she'd snap at me over the smallest things. At first, I chalked it up to stress. She was a nurse, and her job was demanding. But then the accusations started. Out of nowhere, she accused me of cheating. I was blindsided. I'd never so much as looked at another woman since the day we got married. I tried to reassure her, but she wouldn't listen. She'd cry, scream, and storm out of the house, leaving me to explain to the kids why Mommy was so upset. Things escalated quickly. One night, she came home with a black eye. She claimed I'd hit her during an argument. I was horrified. I'd never laid a hand on her, ever. But she stuck to her story, and before I knew it, the police were at our door. I was arrested, charged with domestic abuse, and slapped with a restraining order. I lost my job, my reputation, and worst of all, my kids. The court granted Sarah full custody, and I was only allowed supervised visits once a month. I was devastated. I spent months in a fog trying to figure out how my life had spiraled so out of control. I hired a lawyer, but Sarah's accusations were damning. She had photos of her injuries, texts from friends who claimed I'd been flirting with other women, and even a fake restraining order from a neighbor who said I'd been violent. The judge believed her, and I was left with nothing. But I wasn't going to give up. I moved into a tiny apartment, took odd jobs to make ends meet, and started rebuilding my life from scratch. It was hard, really hard, but I kept going for my kids. I wanted to prove to them that their dad wasn't the monster Sarah made me out to be. Fast forward 3 years, I'd finally started to turn things around. I landed a decent job, saved up enough to buy a small house, and even started dating again. My relationship with the kids was still strained, but I was making progress. Then, out of the blue, I won the lottery. Not just a little scratch-off, I'm talking $50 million. It was life-changing. I paid off my debts, bought a new car, and set up college funds for Emily and Jake. I even started a charity to help other men who'd been falsely accused in custody battles. That's when Sarah showed up. She came to my door one evening, looking like she'd just stepped out of a soap opera. Tears streaming down her face, she begged for forgiveness. She said she'd made a terrible mistake, that she'd been manipulated by her boss at the hospital, who'd convinced her I was cheating. She claimed he'd pressured her into framing me so she could get full custody and move in with him. But now he'd left her, and she was struggling to make ends meet. She wanted me back. She wanted us to be a family again. I was stunned. Part of me wanted to believe her, to forgive her, and move on. But another part of me, the part that had spent years picking up the pieces of my shattered life, was furious. How could she just waltz back in like nothing had happened? How could she expect me to trust her again? Before I could even respond, she dropped the bomb. "I know about the lottery," she said, her voice trembling. "I deserve half of it. I'm still your wife, legally. If you don't give me what I'm owed, I'll take you to court." And just like that, the stakes were higher than ever. Sarah wasn't here to reconcile. She was here for the money, and I wasn't about to let her take what little I'd managed to rebuild. But I also knew I couldn't fight her head on. If I wanted to protect my kids, my future, and my sanity, I'd have to play this smart. Sarah's threat hung in the air like a storm cloud. I didn't say much that night, just told her I'd think about it and closed the door. But inside, I was seething. How could she do this? After everything she'd put me through, she had the audacity to demand half of my lottery winnings? I knew I couldn't let her win, but I also knew I had to be careful. Sarah was manipulative, and if I wasn't strategic, she'd find a way to twist things in her favor. The next morning, I called my lawyer, Greg. He'd been with me through the divorce and knew the whole sordid history. When I told him about Sarah's demand, he let out a low whistle. "This is bad," he said. "If she can prove you were married when you won the lottery, she might have a case. We need to dig up everything we can on her. her lies, her motives, anything that shows she's not entitled to a dime. I spent the next few weeks gathering evidence. I hired a private investigator to look into Sarah's past, and what we found was shocking. Turns out, her boss at the hospital, the one she claimed had manipulated her, had been fired for embezzlement. Sarah had been involved, too. She'd helped him siphon money from the hospital's charity fund, and when he got caught, he threw her under the bus. She'd been quietly paying back the money ever since, which explained why she was struggling financially. But that wasn't all. The PI also uncovered texts between Sarah and her boss from around the time she accused me of cheating. In them, they discussed framing me so she could get full custody and move in with him. It was all there, proof that she'd lied, manipulated the system, and destroyed my life just to be with him. I felt a mix of anger and relief. Anger because she'd ruined everything for nothing, and relief because I finally had the evidence to clear my name. But I didn't act right away. I wanted to see how far Sarah would go. A few days later, I got served with papers. Sarah was suing me for half of the lottery winnings, claiming she was entitled to it as part of our marital assets. She'd also filed for alimony, arguing that she'd sacrificed her career to raise our kids and deserved financial support. It was a bold move, especially considering she'd been the one to leave me. I didn't respond to the lawsuit right away. Instead, I reached out to Sarah one last time. I met her at a coffee shop, and I could tell she was nervous. She kept fidgeting with her cup, avoiding my eyes. "I'll give you one chance to drop this," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Walk away, and I won't expose what I know." She laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "You don't have anything on me," she said. "You're just bluffing." That's when I slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of the texts, the hospital's internal investigation report, and a statement from her former boss admitting their affair and the plan to frame me. Her face went pale as she flipped through the documents, but Sarah didn't back down. Instead, she doubled down. "You think this changes anything?" she snapped. "I'll just say you forged it. No one will believe you." And with that, the battle lines were drawn. Sarah wasn't going to give up without a fight, and neither was I. But I had one card left to play, one she didn't see coming. The courtroom was packed on the day of the hearing. Sarah had made sure to play the victim, showing up in a modest dress, her face carefully made up to look tired and worn. She even brought Emily and Jake, sitting them in the front row like props. My stomach churned as I saw them, my kids looking confused and uncomfortable. Sarah was using them as pawns, and it made me furious. The judge, a stern woman in her 50s, called the court to order. Sarah's lawyer went first, painting me as a neglectful husband who'd abandoned his family and was now hoarding millions while his ex-wife struggled to make ends meet. He even brought up the old domestic abuse charges, claiming they were proof of my volatile nature. I clenched my fists under the table, but I kept my face neutral. This was just the opening act. When it was my lawyer's turn, Greg didn't hold back. He presented the evidence we'd gathered, the texts, the hospital report, the statement from Sarah's former boss. He painted a clear picture of Sarah's lies and manipulation, showing how she'd orchestrated the entire situation to destroy me. The judge's expression grew darker with each piece of evidence, and I could see Sarah squirming in her seat. But Sarah wasn't done. Her lawyer called her to the stand, and she played her part perfectly. She cried as she described how terrified she'd been of me, how she'd only accused me of cheating because she was scared for her life. She even claimed the texts were fake, planted by me to ruin her reputation. It was a bold move, and for a moment, I worried the judge might believe her. Then it was my turn. Greg called me to the stand, and I laid it all out. I talked about the years I'd spent rebuilding my life, the pain of being separated from my kids, and the betrayal I'd felt when I realized Sarah had lied about everything. I didn't hold back, but I didn't exaggerate either. I wanted the judge to see the truth, not just about Sarah, but about who I really was. The turning point came when Greg called Sarah's former boss to the stand. He was nervous, clearly reluctant to testify, but under oath, he admitted everything. He confirmed the affair, the embezzlement, and the plan to frame me. He even admitted that Sarah had been the one to suggest the fake restraining order. The courtroom erupted in murmurs, and Sarah looked like she wanted to disappear. But the real bombshell came next. Greg played a recording, one I hadn't even known about. It was a conversation between Sarah and her lawyer, recorded by the private investigator. In it, Sarah admitted that she didn't really want the money for herself. She wanted it to pay off her debts from the embezzlement scandal and to fund a new life with her new boyfriend, a guy she'd been seeing for months. The judge's eyes narrowed as she listened, and I could see the tide turning in my favor. Sarah's lawyer tried to object, but the damage was done. The judge called for a recess, and when we returned, she delivered her ruling. Sarah's lawsuit was dismissed, and she was ordered to pay my legal fees. The judge even reopened the custody case, citing Sarah's pattern of deceit and manipulation as grounds for reconsideration. As we left the courtroom, Sarah tried to confront me. "You think you've won?" she hissed. "This isn't over." But for the first time in years, I felt like I had the upper hand. The battle wasn't over, but I'd won the first round. And I was ready for whatever came next. The weeks following the court ruling were a whirlwind. Sarah, desperate and cornered, tried every trick in the book to regain control. She filed appeals, dragged me back to court for smaller issues, and even tried to turn Emily and Jake against me by feeding them lies about how I was hoarding money and didn't care about them. But this time I was prepared. I had evidence, a solid legal team, and most importantly, the truth on my side. The custody hearing was the final showdown. Sarah arrived with her new boyfriend in tow, a slick-looking guy who reeked of arrogance. She dressed the kids in old, ill-fitting clothes, clearly trying to paint herself as the struggling single mom. But her act was wearing thin. The judge had already seen through her lies, and this time Sarah's theatrics didn't work. I presented a detailed plan for how I'd provide for Emily and Jake: stable housing, a good school district, and a support system that included my sister, who'd agreed to help with childcare. I also showed the judge the college funds I'd set up for the kids with my lottery winnings, proving that I was thinking about their future. Sarah, on the other hand, had nothing but excuses. She couldn't explain where the money from the embezzlement had gone, and her new boyfriend's shady past didn't help her case. The judge didn't take long to make her decision. She awarded me full custody of Emily and Jake, citing Sarah's unfit behavior and history of deceit. Sarah was granted supervised visitation rights, but only if she completed counseling and parenting classes. It was a victory, but it didn't feel like one. All I could think about was how much my kids had been through because of Sarah's lies. The real resolution came a few months later. Emily and Jake had moved in with me, and slowly but surely they began to adjust. It wasn't easy. They were confused, angry, and hurt, but we worked through it together. I made sure they knew they were loved and safe, and over time, they started to open up about how Sarah had manipulated them. It broke my heart to hear, but it also gave me hope. We were healing, one day at a time. As for Sarah, she didn't take the loss well. She tried to appeal the custody decision, but without evidence or money to fund her legal battles, she eventually gave up. I heard through the grapevine that her new boyfriend left her shortly after the custody ruling, and she moved out of state to live with a relative. I didn't feel sorry for her, not after everything she'd done, but I didn't gloat either. I was done wasting energy on her. The lottery money, which had been such a point of contention, ended up being a blessing in disguise. I used it to secure my kids' future, donate to organizations that helped fathers in custody battles, and start a small business that allowed me to work from home and spend more time with Emily and Jake. It wasn't the life I'd imagined, but it was a good one.